Good evening, and welcome to EduVue on the EdReach Network with Show 30 in our second season. We feature a panel of experts with a purpose of professionally and critically discussing and assessing the current trends and topics in education and technology.
Tonight, our regular panelists, we will be introducing standards-based grading, and we are actually joined by a local expert on standards-based grading, Robin Mathews. Robin is a veteran math teacher. She currently teaches at Mount Vernon Presbyterian School here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Before we welcome Robin, we want to remind you that you can find EduVue on YouTube, iTunes, and the EdReach Network, where all of our shows are available. We'd love for you to be a more frequent, we'd love to be a more frequent presence in your ear, especially if you can't make our live shows.
And hey, let me start over. And EduVue loves our back channels on Google Plus and Twitter at #EduVue. Please send in your questions or comments in standards-based grading about standards-based grading for Robin and the panelists using the back channel and the Q&A feature on the Google Plus event page.
Robin, thank you so much for being here. Please take a moment to introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? We know you're at Mount Vernon, so tell us more.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm originally from California. I moved to Atlanta a couple of years ago to take this position at Mount Vernon because I was so excited by the innovative education that Mount Vernon was doing. And it was exciting to go to a place where trying new things was encouraged. It was actually not just encouraged, but expected. And I had been doing standard-based grading at my previous school since about January of 2011. So it was exciting to know that I could come here, I could continue with the things I was trying, and willing to do more. I started actually as a Bible teacher and ended up a math teacher along the way. So I've taught both in the social sciences area as well as in the math area, and I love teaching. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into the thick of things, let's talk hot topics, friends.
Hot topics.
Hot topic.
Well, I think the first hot topic, Kate, did we go somewhere last evening?
Yes, we did.
Wait, what? What are you talking about?
Oh, did we go somewhere last evening?
I don't know. It must be another person.
Oh, no. Well, it wasn't my hot topic, but we had a little event last night. You might have heard of it. It was called EdTech Women Atlanta. And last night was our kickoff event, and it was wonderful.
Yes, we had about, 32 people show up. All women within the Metro Atlanta area. And again, like we emphasized, Metro Atlanta is like a 100-mile span. It's not like your typical little small city. So we had people, I think, there was a recent Auburn University graduate. There was, Lindsay, who lives in Athens. So people from far and wide. Athens, by the way, is University of Georgia country people. And it was a great event. It lots of talking, a lot of people bonding over the fact that they geek out about ed tech and they're not alone. So it was a great, not really a sisterhood kind of moment, but a bonding kind of moment.
It was, and so we are hoping to grow that organization and see where it goes. We're excited for ISTE to be here and be part of that as EdTech Women Atlanta, so we're excited. But that wasn't a hot topic, so I just thought I'd throw that one in there. My hot topic is, we've all taught with document cameras, right? I remember my very first document camera. It was this, beast of a monster, and it was, to move it was horrible. Okay. Well, I love my friends in IPVO, and they just keep making things smaller and smaller for me, so I love it. Okay, so y'all see this? This is their brand new document camera. It's called the iZiggy. It is wireless. Yeah, that's right. This little tiny thing, and I will tell you, I've not played with it a whole lot. It does expand. It does get bigger. I'm trying to get the whole screen in there. But this little tiny thing is wireless, works with Mac, PC, and iPad.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be doing a little review on it pretty soon as I play around with it a little bit more. But if you have not checked out the new iZiggy document camera from IPVO, you have to go do that. They just keep coming out with cooler products. And when we start talking wireless, you've got me, at the wall. I did a review on their interactive whiteboard as well. that's like teeny tiny and so portable. And that's what I love about all these products is they're so portable. I think when we start talking about different types of learning environments and we realize that they're not confined to four walls and they're not confined to one tiny little space, our tools have to be portable. Our tools have to be able to be here 1 minute and there in the next minute and not require some intense setup along the way. And so that's what I love about my IPEVO products, is that they're really working to build products that are going to meet the needs of teachers who are not constant, who are not, worried about staying in one place, doing one thing, always around the circle time, taking care of, learning in one specific spot, because learning should not be in one place. So,
Amen.
Check out the iZiggy, and I'll let y'all know when I get that review done, and I'll play with that a little bit. But I just wanted you to see this teeny tiny little document camera.
Can you tell us the price, or is it?
Yeah, it is. I was going to screen share, but every time I screen share, it just gets all crazy. Let's see if I'm good, if I can screen share tonight. Doesn't like screen share, but let's try desktop. Let's start that.
Here we go.
Switch. Okay. It's nice and here it is.
I don't see it. Does anybody else? There we go.
Here we go.
There it is. So it's $159. Which is, a very nice price, and this gives you a very nice rundown of, the details. You can kind of read that for yourself. I won't, run through all those specs for you, but, for the price to be able to move it around and kind of, do whatever you want to. I know I own also the EduVue by IPEVO and love that. It's at a much smaller price point, but you get what you pay for. So you kind of got to test out these things to see what it is that you really want and figure out what your price point is.
We buy a lot of those, Jamie. I'm a huge IPEVO fan, and they give great discounts to schools, everyone. And you don't have to buy massive amounts of them. You can just buy one. But if you turn in a school purchase order, they'll give you a discount. Pretty good one, too.
You hear that, Robin?
I did hear that. I was checking that out. That was already on my tech list to Mikey for the next year.
There you go.
Mikey's our amazing IT guy. So.
Hey, Jamie, how's the resolution on it?
I have not played around with it much, to be honest. But I use the EduVue, which is their, I think, $49 document camera. I use that when I use my computer upstairs and can run a Hangout on that.
Okay.
So, and I have compared both the IPEVO and the hover cams, which come in at around a $300 price point. And so, you get what you pay for. So, $150 document camera, I'm excited because I think it's going to come in pretty comparable to what I've seen with the $300 hover cams. At least I'm hoping it will. But I'll let y'all know.
It has a light as well, correct, Jamie?
Yes.
Because I don't have the Ziggy, I just have the HD document camera.
Yes.
And it's very, very clear. I mean, it does great. It goes up to 1280. I think that's the max, but it's really, really sharp.
Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, it's
yes,
wireless. Is it via Bluetooth?
Yeah, so connects. I know you probably can't see it, but there's a little spot on it that says Wi-Fi. Can I get it in there?
Oh, Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm.
So for all the math teachers out there who like to show like math problems and so forth, is it pretty accurate as far as the real time? If they were writing something on there and the students wanted to see?
I have never had a problem with any of their products, even at their $49 product price, with it being in real time. I mean, with any document camera, you're going to have that
Lag.
lag. That's just kind of missed. But like I said, I haven't had a chance. I just unboxed it a couple days ago, so look forward to giving that a shot. But I'll let y'all know.
Awesome. Well, I was digging around today, looking at some different various websites and tools and things like that, and stumbled upon Haiku Deck now has a web-based feature. So where you don't have to necessarily have an iPad to create Haiku Deck presentations. So I'm going to tweet that out now. I was really excited to see that. And they've also got a form where you can go in and ask to be notified when they have out any other type of platform prepared. So it is in beta, and they do want your feedback, but Haiku Deck now web-based. Awesome.
Very great.
All right, and Robin, I believe you have a hot topic to contribute as well.
I do, and it is math specific. There's this great website. It's called nixthetricks.com, and I will tweet that website out. And it's a wonderful space where a lot of teachers who are involved in social media have come together to talk about the things that happen in math education that we would typically call a trick, but doesn't really actually help students learn math. And alternatives to teaching the trick so that we can teach students that they can really understand what's happening in the mathematics that they're doing and not just trying to memorize a trick. And the difference between a trick and, say, a mnemonic device. A mnemonic device is fantastic. You know, that's just a way we remember things. Tricks are things that are, I would say, non-mathematical ways that people have come up with to solve a mathematical problem. And the problem is that when a student has forgotten the trick they memorized, they don't know the math behind it, and they're stuck. So I really like this because it's collaborative. There are certain things in debate, and so there's a free Kindle web book that you can download. I can't remember if it's Kindle or not now, actually, but there's a kind of free book that you can download where there's been agreement. But then there's also a place on the website where it's the kind of current debate between math teachers of, is this a trick? Is this something we should get rid of? And what's the alternative? And I really like that as well because teachers are presenting alternative ideas instead of just saying, stop doing this. It's, what should we be doing instead?
I like that. I think most of math education is all tricks in my head.
It really is.
Yeah.
And really quick, we have a question from Tarsha Burrows.
That's my girlfriend from North Carolina.
She wants to know really quick on the document camera, how is the connectivity? I don't think you know yet, Jamie, right?
I don't know yet. No, I haven't connected it yet, but I'm going to do, like, hopefully the next few days, I'm going to do a review on it, and I'll let y'all know.
Awesome. All right, guys, so let's get into the meat of the meeting tonight, talking about standards-based grading, and I'm going to throw out just a quick, I can't even speak tonight. It's a Monday, y'all. A quick question to kind of get things rolling, and particularly for Robin and for everybody else to answer. What is standards-based grading?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Gosh, there's so much to that terminology, and in the standards-based grading community, it has started to change to standards-based learning, because the ideas that make up standards-based grading aren't just about grading themselves, but really how students learn and it is part of how we want to assess their learning, but it goes to so many things. So even the Twitter chat is now transitioning from SBG chat to SBL chat. But I think it's the idea that within a content area, you have a certain set of standards that students should learn, and what you're doing is you're letting them know how they're doing in relationship to those particular standards. However, it doesn't have to only be content. One of my amazing colleagues, TJ Edwards, he's a biology teacher. He uses SBG, but we have at Mount Vernon, we have something called the Mount Vernon Mindsets, and he has content as one of his categories, but he has mindsets as other categories. So things like collaborator, communicator, ethical decision maker, those carry the same weight in his class, and so he's assessing students on how they're doing in these various categories, not just content. So it can look different, I think, and I think it does look different in different classrooms, but to me that's kind of the basics of SVG.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking, and I'm coming from a very elementary perspective, and so we live on standards. That's our life. That's our lifeblood is to pull out standards. I also taught in Texas, and in Texas, the district that I taught in, and pretty much every other district that had Eduphoria, we literally had a web-based program that I would go in and type in my lesson plans. I would look over to see what my math standards were. I would drag in my math standards, and then my lessons developed around my math standards. So standards-based teaching to me is very familiar. I think the grading piece probably got lost somewhere, and of course I've been out of the classroom in 2 years, and that, you know, lots happened in that time. But I think probably for me the grading, we pulled in the standards, and we were teaching on the standards, and we were teaching around the standards. But then when it came to grading, I don't think it was as clear of a connection straight across to me. So I think that's the takeaway I think about. And so how do you make certain and I know in secondary that's going to look a little bit different, obviously. But are they keeping track of the standards? Is it like a dual process? You're both keeping track, but they're having some responsibility to keep track of the standards they've mastered and those they're working on?
That is a phenomenal question. So how it looks in my classroom is for each standard, and my standards are based on our math learning outcomes for the individual courses. And depending on the learning outcome, there could actually be multiple standards that I assess on for one learning outcome. Sometimes learning outcomes are packed with multiple things in one. And sometimes I have standards that aren't even necessarily in that topic, that class, but they are things the students need to know to be able to complete certain activities. So in my classroom, like I'll have in each unit a standard, and it might be like something like standard 5.10 actual roots in my Algebra 2 honors class, and that means, you know, I'm assessing a student on being able to find the actual roots of a polynomial. And so what I do when I'm really ahead of things, it's amazing, what I do is I'll give them a Google Doc at the beginning that I'll share with them, and it will list the school standards for, like, our school learning outcomes. It will list the specific skills I'm going to assess them on, and they're numbered. It will show them which skills they'll be assessed on multiple times, and give them kind of the highlights of the units. I wish I could say I did that on every single unit. I'm not quite there yet. The students do really like when I do that. And so, see, I can show you, let me see if I can show you a screenshot of my gradebook, obviously without names, but to get an idea what this kind of looks like for me. Let's see. Screen share, is that the one I choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh yeah, I want to share that one. It says it's starting. Okay. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so this is from a PD that my colleague TJ and I did at our school. If you can see that, like across the top, I have different standards in the gradebook. So students see in the gradebook where they are with very specific standards. This one might be a better view. Whoops. You can see the standards, and those little blue circles are where I've put comments. And like there's this one column here. This is I brought up actual roots because that was one students struggled with, and that comment is where I put how students' grade change. So on this screen, you can see a student had originally a 50, but now their most recent score is an 87.5, and so they can see their growth, and I can see their growth. The nice thing about that as well is I can see when students are like if there's a certain skill students are retaking a lot. That lets me know also something about my teaching of that topic, that if this many students are having to retake, then I probably have not done the best job in terms of teaching that actual content, and so I need to change how my instruction. So not only does it inform the student how they're doing, but it informs me about my instructional methods as well.
Mm-hmm. So you let them retake how many times? Like, so I'm talking
Unlimited.
like unlimited up until the end of the semester?
So this year it was until a week before final exams. Next year it will be 2 weeks because that was crazy. And I just, I mean, and as much as I wish we could just go until the end, we, you know, at our school we're required, and especially in the spring, our students can exempt finals, and so we have to tell them a week beforehand, and so at least for spring semester it will be 2 weeks before. I might keep a week before in the fall since no one can exempt, but you know, those are those little things that you figure out and you realize in terms of teacher time, I can only do so much, and as much as I want to do this, I can only, you know, it can only last for so long.
So Robin, I'm so glad you brought that up. That brought to my mind several things. How many assessments are you making for each standard if you're allowing them to retake it up till the final? That would be my first one.
Yes. Okay, so what I have started this year, and and let me just are probably original at all. I have read so much of what other people do and mishmashed it together. So if I am not giving people credit, I am sorry, because I know I didn't create all of these ideas. So I use a test writer program called EduVue. And what I've done is, starting this year, is for each standard I've created a retake, and a lot of times I'll make it at the same time I make the quiz, so that if a student is retaking something, then I have, like 5.10 actual roots, and I can print that out. I don't give students back the retakes. I have a file on every student, so I put their retake in that file, and if they want to go over it with me, I'll sit at my desk and go over it with them, but I don't hand those back so that I can use that same retake with multiple students. So that reduces the number of retakes I have to create. Also with EduVue, it's a dynamic test software, so I can create dynamic questions that will change values for me if needed. So at the most, I will typically make 2 to 3 retakes per skill, but that's very rare that I would make that many. It's typically I only make 1.
Okay. And then secondly, how are you then reteaching? I know if there's a lot of students who are, that need it over, you'll do something in class. But do they come to tutorial? Are you flipping your classroom or blending your learning so that they can go back and re-watch a particular standard?
Yes. So I do flip my classroom. I find that flipping and SVG goes together really, really well. And I really like the flow of my classroom at this point in time. So yes, they can go back and watch videos, and I don't flip every lesson, but the awesome thing is they have learned how to then find videos on their own, and so sometimes go back. I have them in class. They sit in groups. They don't sit in individual rows, so they're working together in class all the time. And so I require them, I have a sign-up genius, and I require them to sign up the night before a retake, and they have to state not only what their skill they're retaking, but what they did to be prepared to retake. So sometimes it could be, I came to tutorial and talked to you. You and I spoke in class. When we went over it in the class, the quiz in class, I understood my mistakes. Sometimes it's, I found a video and did some practice on that. Sometimes it's, I met with this certain classmate during study hall and they helped me with it. So it's a variety of ways, and I really like that because they're taking more charge of their learning and figuring out what do I need to know and how can I get that information. So as an educator, I mean, that to me is the dream.
Well, I just tweeted a Texas district that has gone to this, and I chuckle because Facebook is a little more personal for me than all my other social networks. And one day I'm just perusing, and I see some parents that I know in Texas just ripping this idea, this concept to shreds. This whole concept of, they're going to let them take these tests over and over again? Are you kidding me? They're going to let them not get, a 0 because they don't turn something in? Are you kidding me? Where in the world are they going to learn? Jobs aren't going to be like this. Employers are going to be. They were ripping it. And so, of course, I jump in mindfully with my perspective. And the funny thing is, the very next day, Amber Tiemann posted the exact same link. And Amber is an administrator in Texas. And every comment on hers was, oh, this is wonderful. This is great. I love this. What a great philosophy. And so it was this moment where I went, oh, my gosh, there's such a disconnect between our educators' philosophies and our stakeholders' philosophies. And so I tweeted that for Didn't I See, and then someone just said that Huntsville City is going to start 3rd through 5th standards-based reporting next year. So what stakeholder issues have you encountered, if any?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, Jamie.
That's okay. What stakeholder issues have you? Parents, community members? Has there been questioning, backlash, concerns? Has it been, fairly easy?
It has in so many ways fairly easy, and especially so. In my previous school, and I blogged about this, and I'm a horrible blogger because I blogged like over the summer and at the beginning of the year, and then I don't know how people have the time to do it during the school year. I'm like in awe of the people that do that. That my hands down to that. when I first started doing this at my previous school, I had this awesome administrator who mid-year let me start doing this. I mean, that just doesn't happen, right? And I had great support from the students and the parents there. And then again, at my current school, when I interviewed there, you know, I let my administrator know, hey, this is what I do, and well, is that something you'll still let me do? And he was all on board with that. I've had, so this is finished my second year there. I've had one parent who didn't want their child to do retakes because they felt like that was not like the real world, and that is it in terms of that type of comment. And I thought, wow, you know, I guess if you fail your driving test, then I guess that's it. You never get to drive, right? Because the real world doesn't let you retake, which was just like so crazy, that mindset to me. But and I think I'm at a school where our philosophy is fail up. And I think that really helps with doing something like SVG because we talk about fail up. We hear it from our head of school. We hear it from the head of the upper school. And so this idea of we are going to make mistakes and we are going to learn from our mistakes and do better is just embedded in our school's philosophy. And so I think SVG goes really well with that. Otherwise, you know, I really haven't had, as I think, you know, there's little issues here and there. Some, you know, kids are like, wait, why do we only get to do one a day? You know, I do put some limitations on it. They can't take, you know, 100 skills a day. Not that there necessarily be 100 in a year, but you know, there's some limitations on things. But other than that one parent, I've heard nothing but positive.
And you have a parent letter that you send out, correct?
I do. At the beginning of the year, I have a letter to parents and students, and it explains it. It gives the grading scale. I tie my SVG. One of the things I started doing this year is I tie it to blooms as much as possible. I actually tie not only my, so I do, like, I call them SVG quizzes, and so my quizzes are all standards-based, and then I will have a summative test at the end of a unit. And I have tied blooms into all of my assessments, so it's in my SVG quizzes as well as my summative assessments.
So we do have some Q&A, but really quick, I want to say that the gradebook that Mount Vernon is using is Power School. So it looks complex, but it actually is fairly easy to use, particularly with standards-based grading, and be able to differentiate and whatnot. So having a very friendly gradebook system is probably helpful.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Definitely.
Compared to, what do we have the year before, Blackbaud?
Oh.
Oh, people are laughing.
I still was able to do it.
So yeah, you're still able to do it, but Power School, the beautiful thing about Power School that Robin also does is she enters comments per student per grade. So she can actually, the students can go back and see, like, okay, this is how I've improved throughout the, you know, retakes. So that's kind of key for students to keep track and students to learn as well. So we have a couple of things on the Q&A. First, Cyberman, our friend Jerry Blumengarten, shared his.
You have a question for me?
Well, he has a comment. He has two comments for you. He has two comments. He has a comment first. He shared his standards-based grading webpage on his grading website, and he also said that y'all are looking wonderful. So enjoy learning so much from you guys. And then he also says, Robin, you should go to my Flip Classroom page where he has a Flip Class math maven, Stacy Roshan, who he recommends on that page, which I will, well, he's probably tweeted that already, so I don't need to tweet that.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry is awesome. And then
I haven't seen Jerry in a while.
I know. Well, we need to get him on before ISTE again. And then Tarsha has two comments. She says, standards-based grading is contingent upon how students learn. All students won't look the same on the grading scale, which I think is a very good point, which is why I'm kind of happy you tied in the blooms. And she also says the expectations for each level have to be clearly defined.
Yes.
Which is very true.
I agree. And I put that in my letter that I give to, it's a one-page letter with a rubric that I send out to parents and students. And I have that on my blog. All my documents, I have everything shared on my blog. So they're available to anyone, and it's Mathews, I think, .wordpress.com is the one I believe I use. I should know this. But I do have that. I list that there in terms of what's expected for each grade. And a lot of SVG does like a 4-3-2-1 grading scale. And I did originally. I found being a secondary school, that was really hard for people to understand how they're so used to letter grades and the ABC thing, that I found it very difficult to translate to how we have to grade in a secondary school situation. And so because of that, last year I switched to basically it's a 4 is a 100, a 3 is an 85, a 2 would be like a 75, and a 1 is a 50 is how I have ended up corresponding it. But it doesn't necessarily look like that for most people, and I'm sure there's lots of SVG purists who would decry that I have done that. And that's okay. That's their opinion. I just have found that that works best for my stakeholders.
So, talking about grades, what are all the ways that a student can earn a B+, for example, in your classroom, or what should a grade represent as it relates to learning?
And yeah, those were questions I posted, so I wanted to hear a little bit about what the rest of you thought on that.
Awesome. Well, you probably are familiar with how I feel about grades. Being I like to gamify. I'm a big fan of gamification of mastery learning. For me, I don't like to start with 0. I start with 100 in my class, and students can just work their way down from there. Or, keep it there if they'd like. But I do want them to aim for mastery. So I do like the aspect of the retakes. I'm willing, if a student is willing to advocate for themselves, they can advocate and get, work as hard as they want to get a grade that represents, okay, this kid knows 90% of the material of the standards. This kid knows 96% of the material of the standards. That's what the numbers mean for me. Now, whether we have them represented as grades or not, that's a big philosophical question. I'm not sure if grades are going to get the job done like you're talking about. I think the number system will be better. But so for a B+ in my classroom, again, it's the mastery, it's the effort, it's the self-advocating, and showing me that whatever the B+ scale is, 80, 87, 88, that they have mastered that percent of the content via the standards. That's for me at least.
Kat, do you find that all your kids will self-advocate? I mean, I know you teach high school, so I'm just wondering if that's a common trait in all high schoolers, or do you have the kids that that could speak up for themselves and don't?
That's the thing, though. There's so much more, and Robin can probably back me up on this. There's so much more that we do in our classrooms as opposed to just teaching the content. One of the first things I do in my classroom is it is literally I create a safe and secure location. I want them to have a very comfortable environment, from the desk location to the lighting, all the way up to feeling comfortable enough where they can make a mistake in the classroom. That is first. Second is the classroom culture, making sure they understand the routines, where they go, so they walk in and they don't feel confused. And then from there, it's the practice of getting kids to see, oh, well, it's okay if I made this mistake. I'm comfortable in this classroom. Why don't I try harder? It's me teaching them, essentially, not just how to learn, but how to advocate for themselves so they can continue to learn beyond just that one day in the content. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, Robin, do you agree that that's something that you have to create before the standards-based grading will work really well?
Well, I don't think you have to create that before SVG would work. I did SVG before without creating that, but gosh, as I have learned as a teacher, that is something I would never not do again. One of the things I did this year is I didn't teach any content for 4 days. And we spent 4 days getting to know each other, and I had posters up around in my room, and the kids did sticky notes like, what kind of teacher do you want? How do we show respect to each other? Things like that. We're a team. What does that look like? And we spent time doing things like that. One of the first activities I gave them, I got this, I think her name's Kelly O'Shea. She's a physics teacher. I got this off her blog. It's Make a Mistake Whiteboarding. And so I had students in their table groups. I gave each a problem, and I said, now you have to do this and specifically make a mistake. And then the other groups are going to try and figure out what your mistake is. And so we learned that it was okay right away to make mistakes, and we could feel safe and comfortable with each other in that first week. So I don't think I would ever start a year without doing that again. But does SBG work without doing that? I think that it does, because I've done it without doing that.
I guess my question was more was, do you think it's an important component, not would it work? It is
Absolutely.
an important component.
More and more, I just, with the research that I read, as well as what I have experienced myself, I think that relationship between the teacher and the student and the classroom climate is just of utmost importance.
Right. And it's neat to hear you guys talking about that at the high school level, because I just kind of have this vision, and I've only been in one high school in the last few years, that it's kind of a fend for yourself environment a lot of times. And a lot of the things that you're talking about really go back to the middle school philosophy, you know, and how to get your kids into the middle school mindset. Not necessarily how we always do it, but how we'd like it to be.
Right.
Well, actually,
Yes.
Kat, I think that, I'm going to have to look it up, but my middle school people that I had studied about, I think they're University of Florida people. I'm going to go look that up.
We are awesome people. But yeah, it's, at least from my experience from doing these, I guess I'm not going to call them newfangled things, because they've been around for a little while. But whenever you're adjusting your classroom, particularly to something that you know that works from the research, like Robin and I have conversations all the time about how awesome the research is and how we're not using it, that people are not reading it enough and bringing it into their classrooms. But when you're trying to do these things, you want the kids to feel comfortable. So like when I gamified my Spanish 4 class, I didn't just like jump in and be like, quests, achievements. What was it? What did I call it? I called it not bosses, but like, you know, leader, not fights. I forget. I had a special terminology for it, for like, in order to get to the next level, you had to complete this one activity. So, but I didn't want to just jump into it. They had to be comfortable. So I didn't do it my first semester. I did it second semester with the same kids. It's creating that comfort that they know they're doing something different, but eventually they start to see that it works, and they embrace it as part of the culture. It is a cultural experience. It's a cultural capital. It's something that you have to, you know, use in your classroom. So, and we have some Q&A.
Okay.
From Cami Hartzell. She says, I've seen behavior grades using 4-3-2-1 scoring to help inform parents and keep kids accountable for work. What do you think about that idea? I know. Oh my gosh, a behavior grade. Oh.
Not a fan. So, and I'm really glad she asked this, because I think this goes back to the question that you had read that I put on our typed up, Kat, about what are the ways a student can earn a B+ and what should a grade represent as it relates to learning. Okay, so as a high school math teacher, I do not believe behavioral grades should be anything in part of a high school math grade. I believe especially, and I think things can be different based on content and based on grade level. So for math, I believe math, do they know math, is the main part that makes up their grade. So for that reason, I got rid of participation grades this year in my classroom. I do not grade their homework whatsoever. And they have learned, like, I don't collect it, I don't grade it, I don't look at it. And I've had students come to me and thank me for that this year. They said, you know, I stopped doing my homework for a while, and I learned on my own that that wasn't good for my learning of the material. And so I realized I really do have to do the assignments you give, not because you're going to grade it, but because that's how it's going to help me learn. There is just, you just don't get that when you force kids to do stuff for a homework grade, and it's practice. So I would say with SBG, in general, the idea of SBG is we don't grade practice, and we don't grade kids on behavior. Now, I do understand that there are ways we want to let parents know if there's some behavioral things happening, and I think there's things like Class Dojo and other stuff out there where we can, if we need to, in the busyness of the day, to keep track of some behavioral things, so that we can contact parents about that, and we'll really, I think, initially have a one-on-one with the student before we contact parents. And then we can go to parents with, here are some things that we're seeing. But I don't believe in behavior being a grade, and I don't think SBG, that to me is just the opposite of SBG.
Hey,
Yeah.
Robin.
Go ahead,
sorry.
Jason.
You grade your quizzes. We had a teacher who was doing standards-based grading, and she didn't even grade her quizzes. She also used that as a guide for how well she was teaching a concept.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard of teachers that do that, and that's just kind of how I do it. A lot of teachers wouldn't grade them and would use it. And, you know, it's interesting. I always think about the word formative assessment because I hear different things about, like, can formative be graded or not be graded? And, you know, how does that work? And for me, like, the way I do a lot of formative in my classroom is I have individual whiteboards, and so we do tons of whiteboarding in my classroom, and my kids love it, and so I'll throw stuff up. And they'll be answering and working on things in their table groups, and so they get a lot of feedback from me formatively that way. And so that I don't actually assess for a grade, but I do SBG for grades this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think either way works with what we would call a standard-based grading system.
Well, I love all of this, and I think the biggest pushback that I can see from a public school perspective is that there's so much of this embedded in what is done. So, for instance, when I did a report card for my third graders, the grades were already in there. But at the end of each 6 weeks, I had to do behavior. I had to go in and give them on a scale behavior scores from a 1 to 4, like Kimi was saying. It was part of the report card. It wasn't an optional thing. Right. And so I think that's the... You know, I think when you start to talk about the big picture, you know, you can only control so much in the picture, and you know, you can't settle yourself on, well, I can't do standards-based grading because I have a report card system that requires me to grade their behavior. You control what you can control, and I too did not grade homework. I didn't even, in my last year, I didn't give homework. I just mixed it all together and said, that's ridiculous. I want to use Edmodo and put out discussion questions and let's discuss things that tie into the standards we're learning. And so I got rid of homework altogether because I found it to be very useless. They weren't doing it. I wasn't grading it. That seemed silly. And so I love that philosophy because and I know there's a lot of homework back and forth debate, but I think it's all about meaningful activities. So we call it what we want to call it, but are we giving them meaningful activities? And then is that for grade versus is that for practice? But you know, I love this whole philosophy because I think it's pulling away from this very constrained system that we're in, that's a one-size-fits-all kind of philosophy. And when we talk about differentiation, this is not differentiation. And I know, Kat, you were saying that your kids are, you know, will advocate for themselves, and you know, who are those kids, and will they? And for me, in saying a kid that gets a B, we want to teach every kid to advocate for themselves to get to that B. You know, that's the goal for me. And obviously, you won't get them all there, but that should be the goal. Is, do you want it? Do you believe in what you're doing? Can you back up what you're doing? And I think that's the big picture. I know in math that there's less gray area. there's less room to work, but I think there's a lot of content areas where there is a lot of room to say, if you believe it, back it up. And we may disagree, but if you can support what you're saying, that's the quality work, because that's really where we want them to go.
Yeah. And can I add a couple things onto that?
Sure. And so then we got some Q&A. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just really love, thanks, Jamie, and I wanted to add a couple of things, like in terms of when you're in a system that you can't really change, right? I mean, even as a private school teacher, we have that. I mean, I love, love, love my school, but one of our policies I don't love, and that is first day after something is due, it's an automatic 50% off. That is not SBG. That isn't fail up to me either. And so we are in discussion about that at our school, about changing that, because we don't have a lot of teacher buy-in to an automatic F for a student. But right, that's the system I work within. So what do? I have very, very limited deadlines. I have almost no deadlines to work around that so that I can fulfill what I am required to do by my school policy, but also do the best that I believe as an educator. And so I think that goes along with what you're saying, Jamie. Like, you may be required to grade behavior. You can't control that, but that doesn't mean you can't do other great things with your students. And how can that look? And that idea of the various grades, like the A, B, C. Why I've tied it into Bloom's is for math, the way I view it is really nothing I teach you is optional. You need it. There is a reason, and we are going to build on this, and you're going to continue building. And so I tied it to Bloom's as my C-level work means if you're getting a C in my class, you probably know everything, but you know it at a lower level Bloom's. And a B level means you still need to know everything, but you know it at mid-level Bloom's. And my A is you know pretty much everything, and you know it at higher order thinking. And so to me, it's not, you know, 70% of the material. It's no, you pretty much know all the material. It's just you know it at a lower level of thinking.
Which any way you can add to, you know, make your perspective stronger is always a good thing, especially bringing in, you know, research-based strategies and other topics like that. So I think your approach is fabulous. And I do want to say regarding the homework thing before I hop into Q&A, you know, for any AP teachers who are watching and thinking, well, I have to give my kids a lot of homework, I taught AP Spanish language, and I did not give homework. You know, you make it happen. If you believe strongly enough about something, you make it happen for your students. And it actually helped. While standard, you know, Robin does standard-based grading, I don't, and I just do formative assessment. I am a very big fan of formative assessment, and that makes all the difference for me. You do what works for your classroom. And so we have a couple comments. Cami Hartzell says, now I'm going to have to convert 4.3.2.1 to letter grades also. And she also says, a question for you, Robin. I'm looking to implement SBG in my 6th grade science class next year. Any tips?
Communication. Communicate what you're doing to the stakeholders. Talk to your immediate supervisor. Make sure that they are on board. Both of my immediate supervisors at both of the schools I've done this with, I showed them my letter. They helped me revise things. They knew the school community better than I did because I was coming in there, and so they helped me with that. So communicate with your immediate supervisor first, because in my experience has been they were wonderful, and then that way, if by chance they heard any type of negative feedback, which I shared with you, I had one thing, they know what's happening, so that's really good. Communicate with students and parents how the children will be assessed. You want to make that very clear, but also kind of short and sweet, right? We don't want to send out pages and pages to families. I keep mine to 1 page, and that includes my rubric as well. So you want to communicate, but communicate concisely. Don't, you know, for your own sanity. You have to think about the things for your own sanity. This year I allowed students they had to sign up by 9 p.m. the night before and sign up Genius. And they had three different days during the week we could do retakes. I might change that to 2 days next week because of the volume of extra grading that it was. And so that's hard. That's an internal conflict I'm personally having because I want to give them multiple chances, but I'm struggling with the time management piece for myself. So, you know, and it looks different. I have one of my colleagues, she's an English teacher, and she does SBG, and she does retakes like I do. But they have to sign up 2 nights before, and she does it twice a week. So how that looks is going to be different. You're going to have to kind of see. I would say less is more in the beginning. The fact that you're going to move to SBG and start offering things like retake is huge, and so that versus if you start out with they could do it any time, any place, and then you start pulling that back, then they feel like things are being taken away from them.
It's great advice. She also has one more question. She says, I've seen, we already talked about that one, behavior grades, so we did that one. Tarsha has a couple of feedback things. She says that she uses 4.3.2.1 as the best ways to explain the levels is to attach exemplars. She also says, I find that if you correlate the levels to numeric percentages, then they don't work as diligently towards demonstrating mastery. That's interesting.
That's not what I've observed, but
yeah, me too.
You know, something else I should add that I changed this year. So it used to be students could choose to do retakes. Some would do them, some wouldn't, right? My honor students who would get an 85 would do a retake, and my on-level student who had a 50 wouldn't. I mean, I think we've all experienced that, and you're like, no, the on-level student with the 50, you're the one that really needs to like learn this material and do the retake. So one of the things I implemented this year was, and because I do flipped, and I have a slightly bit of a mastery-based classroom, like students have a week time window to take a test. There's quizzes, but they don't have to take it on the first day it's offered, type of thing. I have a little bit of flexibility. That there's a lot that I have going on in my classroom, quite frankly. And so because of that, what I've done this year is, if you get a 50 on any skill, you must retake that skill and get a passing grade before you take the test. And adding that requirement has completely transformed my students' learning, and as well as their grades. So, and to me, 85% of my students' grade comes directly from, do you know the math, do you know the math, do you know the math, either SBGs, the quizzes, tests, the final exam. So I feel like their grades really do reflect if a student knows the math. And so let's say I had 70 students this year. Let's say they took 10 tests, so 700 tests. Of those 700 tests, I'd say maybe 10 were failures. And it was because kids didn't follow the requirement to retake before the test came. The kids that did and did what they needed to passed the test. I mean, that is just unheard of in a math classroom, to have that few failures on exams throughout a school year. So, I mean, that to me told me I was doing the right thing, because my kids were understanding the material and passing.
And we have, Stephanie has actually a comment. She asked, would like to know some of the things you do, to help your students understand that it's okay to take risks and make mistakes. And Stephanie, I will so make this a show. I will force my panelists to make this a show about what to do on the first day. So we'll do that again in June. And Robin and I have already talked about it. The first 4 days, you don't teach, and that really, at least the content. And that kind of is a key, regardless of what level you teach, whether it's AP all the way down to elementary. So, and Robin, another question for you. This one I'm kind of thinking of, because you're doing all these amazing things in your classroom, right? And people listening might be like, oh, that's just really daunting. So I want to ask first, why did you incorporate standards-based grading when you're already doing flipped classroom and all those other things?
Great question. Well, actually, I'm trying to remember which one came first, SBG or flipped. Flipped I was doing first, yes. Okay. So it's, I was home from school sick one day, and, I'm a teacher who is nuts. And so I read education stuff all the time, right? I mean, you're homesick, so what do? You read blogs about education. And I was reading some Dan Meyer and some Sean Cornely and who was the other one? Frank, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's like Nochesi, or I don't know. I could spell it, but I don't know how to say it. So I was reading their blogs, and that's where I started learning about standards-based grading. And I fell in love. I got ideas on how to do my parent letter from Frank Nochesi's blog. And I mean, seriously, I went to my administrator the next day and said, I want to do this. Will you let me do it? Because I was finding, for math, I really liked that in a grade book, instead of going, oh, hey, Unit 8, Quiz 1, this was my grade. Well, who knows what that even means? What does that stand for? That in a grade book, the student could look at this and go, hey, my grade on factoring when A equals 1 is this. That shows my level of understanding. I have an A level of understanding. Or now with my blooms, I mean, my students know. We have a poster up in our room that we have blooms up in the classroom. They see how that all correlates. That it's not, they know exactly what they need. I'm hearing more mathematical language from them, because they'll come to me and say, Miss Mathews, I need to reassess on completing the square, and I'm not sure what that means. Can you help me with completing the square? And they know the terminology. I mean, that is huge for students to know the terminology. So they're learning proper vocabulary and terminology just from how I'm grading.
Right, so the academic technology or the academic vocabulary is being built, which is, an entirely separate objective.
Right.
Just by doing it. I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one last Q&A, and then we'll move on a little bit. Cami is also says she's having a hard time figuring out retakes for science, and she talks about how she's having some issues with science concepts. And Cami, I'm sure Robin would agree with me. We're going to turn you over to TJ Edwards. What's his handle? Is it T Edwards or?
It's TJ Edwards. And then it's his football number. I think it's 65. It's his old high school football number. I remember him saying it at Fuse last year, which was hysterical. Let's see. TJ, it's at TJ Edwards 62.
Awesome. Yeah, he is one of our colleagues who is also presented with Robin frequently about standards-based grading, who actually does use that in his science classroom. So we're going to turn you over to him to kind of get a better idea about how to do that in science.
And I would just recommend, regardless of the topic, one of the things I've done with my students, and to me this is like what I would call an A-level question, because it's creating. I say to a student, you create a question for me. You create something. You show me. How would you be able to show me you understand this at a certain level? And they hate sometimes when I do that. But it's a great way. One, it saves you time in creating a question, and two, it really shows, do they understand the material? And a retake does not have to be in writing. I have done them verbally with students before. We've done them on whiteboards. It can be done a variety of ways.
Well, we are actually getting toward the end of the show, so
gosh, that went fast.
It did went really, really fast, didn't it? It's so fast. It's almost too fast to cover everything. But we'll do 2 more questions.
Okay.
First, how do teachers know that what they are doing works? And you asked that, and so I'd like for you to address that to other people, because that is key, I think.
Yes, this is a conversation Kat and I have often. We are hallmates, and we love to talk about research. So one of the things that I do is I pre- and post-test all of my students. And I love, if you have, anyone watching this, listening to this, if you have not read John Hattie's Visible Learning for Teachers, get on Amazon and buy it now. And you need a hard copy because you're going to write all over this book. You don't want a digital copy because you want to be able to write everywhere, and it's my teaching Bible now. And he uses effect size. He does a lot of meta-analysis and uses effect size to find out what actually works in the classroom. So I read his work. I read work of other research as well. But Hattie really inspired me to do pre and post testing. And so all of my students I pre and post test, and I calculate their effect size. And now, according to Hattie's research, the average effect size for a year's worth of learning for a student, no matter what you do, because pretty much anything we do works. It's just some things work better than others. So he found that the average effect size is 0.40. So I always pre and post test my students now, and I calculate their effect size. My Algebra 1 students, so if the average is 0.40, you want to get that or higher, right? My Algebra 1 students, their effect size was 1.43, so that was over 3 times the average. So they had multiple years of learning in 1 year. My geometry students, their average effect size was 2.34. And my Algebra 2 students, their average effect size was 2.8. So that tells me that what I'm doing is working because you can see it. And even I had a student in my Algebra 1 class who just really struggled. He came in extremely low. The neat thing, too, was I emailed each student individually, and I said, here's your percent growth. Like, this student had 140% growth. So even though he was still struggling and had a low grade in the class, he had learned so much. It was incredible. And then I also personalized it and said, okay, and now they took it about a week before the final, and I said, here are the topics that you struggled with on the post-test that are going to show up on your final exam. These are the things that you need to make sure you spend some time studying over the next week. So they got a personalized thing from me. I got information to tell me how effective my teaching was. And I cannot recommend that enough to teachers. Pre- and post-test your kids.
Amen. You are I totally, totally agree. It's something I've been doing for quite some time, and it's always really effective.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the classroom, just one last in the classroom sort of management piece.
Yeah.
I know we looked at your Power School and how you do that, but how do you just manage like the day-to-day, like observations of your students? Do you have some sort of checklist where you walk around and you're looking at something and saying, oh, you know what, I see that this child has mastered this skill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to check it off now. Do you do that, or do you need some sort of product from them? How do you manage that?
So in that sense, I mean, I'm doing that all the time, and I do that a lot. Like I said, with whiteboards, we do a lot of stuff on individual whiteboards. Sometimes we do group whiteboarding as well, so that I can get that kind of feedback and see how students are doing, what I need to fix, who's doing well, etc. But in terms of actually assessing them in the gradebook, that is more of a written piece. I don't use that type of informal observation for what I actually put in a gradebook.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, we are done, unfortunately. Robin, thank you so much. And I'm sure there's going to be tons of lingering questions continue with the back channel. But before you go, please tell us, you know, what you're doing in the near future, how people can find you, follow you, and contact you.
Okay, well, on Twitter, I'm at Romathio, Romathio. That is also my blog on WordPress, as well as my Google Plus name, as well as romathio@gmail.com, so you can find me that way. Where am I going to be? I'm going to be at home because I just graded my finals.
Yay! Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm going to be at a few conferences this summer, but as a participant, not as a leader.
And ISTE, right?
I don't know if I'm going to be at ISTE. I think I might be in California at a math conference at that time. I'm figuring it all out right now.
That's okay. Math conference is very important too, so that's perfectly fine. And we'll go ahead and reveal, first of all, due to majority vote, we will be taking Memorial Day off.
Wise.
Yes, so we will have a little bit of a break, but it's also in preparation for a very, very big guest who we have on the 2nd. On the 2nd, we're featuring Eric Scheninger of Digital Leadership fame. If you have not read the book, you have 2 weeks to do it in. He is most notably, probably, I would think, one of the best-known, well-known voices on social media and education. And I think he actually just made a Forbes list or some kind of list somewhere where he was like a Times list. There's a magazine, I'll find it. Where he was the one education person on that list of people to follow on Twitter. So we are extremely, extremely lucky to have him on. It's going to be an incredible show, and that will be June 2nd at 8:45. So you have 2 weeks to prepare yourself for an amazing show. Go ahead,
yes,
Jamie.
Yeah, I'll get that book and read it. I'm going to finish it at the beach. I'm like halfway through it, so I have to finish
rubbing
it.
this in, and meanwhile, Robin and I have to stay home because we actually have post-planning.
Yes, no, I'm headed to the beach on Saturday, y'all, for a week, and I cannot wait. So yeah, definitely get the book. Be ready to submit some questions. Eric is phenomenal. I did if you haven't watched the Google Hangout, I did it with him for a class project for my EDS program. Do that. He's a phenomenal speaker. He's got such great ideas. So definitely get that book, start reading that, and then send your questions his way. But tonight, thank you, Robin, so much for joining us. It has been wonderful talking about standards-based grading. That's such a breath of fresh air. And so thank you so much for sharing your perspective and how you do that with us and our viewers. And so thank you so much.
Well, you are welcome. Thank you for having me. Sorry to interrupt you, Stacia.
No. Thank you. Also, we want to thank our viewers and our back channelers. I think I just made up a word for joining us. Please continue the conversation. You'll be able to watch this show soon on our EdReach Network channel and our YouTube channel. And you can listen to us by subscribing to our podcast on iTunes.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EduVue, EduVue. And make sure that you also follow EdReach at EdReach. And do not forget 2 weeks from now, Monday, 8:45, June 2nd, Eric Scheninger, Digital Leadership. See you guys in 2 weeks. Enjoy your break.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.